Okay, so welcome to, this is the breakout call number what, 11 or 12? 12. There's nothing going on the EIP so far, but it's very likely that some changes are going to be coming. And Francesco is going to tell us about precisely that. He has a different vision to how to implement 7732 in a simpler way.
Hi, yeah. Can I screen share? Yes, okay. 1 second. Okay, do you see the Hakim thing?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, I'll kind of just go do like a high level overview, like not go too in depth about things. But yeah, basically, I guess the motivation for this document, which, okay, I'll just link it in the chat later, or maybe it's already been linked. Yeah, basically is that, well, it's a variety of things. I guess on the more ePBS side of things, is that I just don't really like super much adding for choice complexity. And I feel like this kind of design with the other boosts, the like withholding and the reveal boost, seemed somewhat hard to like wrap my mind around, and I guess for other people as well. And it just feels like the kind of thing that, you know, later on makes it harder to think about new for choice changes, because you always have to think about how does it interact with the security of these things, and proposer boost is already tricky as it is. So I kind of wanted to try to think about something that is as simple as possible, and not in implementation sense, but in the sense of really like making sure that it works, and, you know, being able to then later put things on top of it if we need to, and things like that. So that's one motivation. And then another motivation was kind of more from the fossil like inclusion list research side, that basically was looking at recently at the fourth choice part of fossil. And there is basically, if we think about fossil without ePBS, there will be this attesting part that's where essentially the enforcement would happen of the inclusion list. Like the whole thing is, it's called that way because it's like fourth choice enforced. And so it would be enforced by attestations. And this basically boils down to this kind of for choice construction that we've talked about a bunch of times in the past, which is, maybe some people know it by the name of block slot attestations, but it's basically the concept of being able to vote against something, like an attestation that does not vote for the current proposal, actually actively voting against the current proposal and possibly making it easier for it to be forked out, which is kind of already, we have that today, in the sense that if you don't get enough votes, then you can be proposer boost reorged, but it's a bit different. It's not like really the default behavior of the fourth choice. It's more like, or well, I mean, it is in some sense, but it's more of like a local decision of proposers to do this or not, and it's easier to go away from it if it causes problems. Um, but yeah, basically, like really putting this into the normal, or like in this like key part of the fourth choice that determines whether or not even we have beacon blocks in the first place, seems just a bit more daunting. And like maybe we will still do it, but basically I was looking for, okay, can in the ePBS thing where we have this in some ways nice separation of beacon blocks and payload, maybe we can do the enforcement on the payload side, since that's anyway the part that actually deals with transactions, so that if something goes wrong, you only maybe start missing payloads and not really also beacon blocks. So that's another part of it. And then the final part of it is also that, yeah, I mean, there's also kind of considerations around DAS as well, like PRDAS or other forms of this, that also have to do with this concept of like basically wanting to vote against a block. Like if a block is unavailable, um, it might not be like, attestations might kind of show that like people will not attest to it if people have actually done sampling. And so based on the votes, you might want to not extend that block. For example, if you're a proposer that does not have a full view of availability, like you don't download all of the data, so you yourself might not know that it's unavailable. So it's actually good for you to have this kind of signal coming from the fork choice that says like don't build on top of this block because it's dangerous. Like it might actually be unavailable. This might be the reason why it didn't get enough votes. So there's also this like enforcement aspect that's very similar to the AS. And so yeah, kind of similar consideration as fossil. Like it would be nice to just do this on the payload, basically. So the proposal roughly is for the slot structure to look like this. um, if you just look at, so propose, a test, release, and some kind of committee vote, it's pretty similar to the ePBS slot structure, like with the PTC, basically of the current EIP. I guess some differences is like here, because we then later need some other small phase, some things are a bit more compressed. But yeah, anyway, just going through the flow of the slot, like someone proposes a beacon block. There's attestations just like today, but at this point the payload still is unknown. Here it's still meant to be like there is a commitment to a specific payload. Then basically in this time between 3 seconds, and it doesn't have to be like an exact deadline. This would be like the builder can kind of choose when this is, but basically at some point between 3 and 7, if a builder observes a certain amount of attestations, it's gonna release its payload. If it does not, then it doesn't. And so basically the builder like gets a clue from attestations about what to do, like whether to release or not. And in this case, yeah, it would have to basically actually listen to attestation subnets. Like this would be like non-aggregated attestations at this point. And yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that's not here in this slot structure is there is still aggregation and like propagation of attestations, like here for throughout this rest of the slot from 3 to 12 or 3 to 9 or whatever it is. But yeah, that's kind of overlaid on this. But the builder would have to like actively listen to the subnets and not just to the global topic. And yeah, basically the idea would be that it releases if it gets 40% of attestations. 40% comes from proposer boost. Basically, if you see at least enough to beat proposer boost, then you cannot be a proposer boost reorg. Like it kind of the block becomes safe from that. And this is all assuming like the chain was stable up until that point, which I think is a fair assumption because a builder can take this into account into the way it bids. It could just bid less if he thinks that the chain is not safe to kind of bid on, basically, because there could be like reorgs. I mean, it's already forked or things like that. So anyway, yeah, the builder listens here to attestations. If he sees 40%, it determines that it's safe enough to release. It releases. Then by this point, just like in the PTC kind of proposal, there is a committee vote. That's called PTC. Here it's called Availability Committee or AC. And the reason to change the name is just that it's not just voting on the payload timeliness. It's kind of has a few roles. I mean, effectively, it's voting on the payload, but like with a couple more things that it needs to think about and like things that we care about coming from this. And then yeah, basically the next thing that's yeah, and I guess at some point here it wouldn't, yeah, so ILs are sent at some point. It doesn't actually have to be after the payload. We could also do this in such a way that you don't need to wait for the previous payload. This is more of a decision to be made within the kind of fossil research. That's not super important here. But yeah, and then at the end there's this basically freeze deadline where basically what happens is that people stop listening for new ILs, or like they do listen for new ILs, but they basically the ones that come later than this deadline, they don't really take them into account. They don't enforce them essentially. They don't put constraints coming from these ILs on the next block. And then this freeze deadline also applies to these AC like availability committee votes. So, I don't know, here there's going to be 500 people voting. 3 seconds later, you've seen most votes. If some vote comes late, you also will not kind of take this into account in the way that you then use the votes, which I will talk about. And so yeah, basically now maybe let me just go through the various kind of actors that are in this pipeline and like what they do with this in these various phases. So the builder I kind of already talked about. In here like B is always going to be the beacon block and P is always going to be the payload, assuming there's like just a beacon block and a payload. But yeah, basically the builder, like the first thing it does is as soon as it sees the beacon block, so this could be like anytime here essentially, it already propagates blobs. So this is without waiting for any attestation. It just does it. This is kind of assuming, I guess this is what already apparently relays do without even waiting to like validate the block or something. You can kind of already propagate blobs because you don't really care about blobs. They don't have like sensitive information, I guess, at least normally. So yeah, you propagate the blobs immediately, so there's more time for that. And then basically you only, well, I guess this part now in the light of these discussions around get blobs and the effects of that, maybe we would have to rethink, but I don't know. This was here basically to say like uh, in principle, if needed, you can propagate the blobs earlier, so that it's basically the timelines are not. It's not just this amount of time to propagate blobs. Like in the if you really need it, you could take more time. And then yeah, once you do see for 40% attestations, you release the payload because you think that it's not going to get reorged at this point, and you don't release it otherwise. Now the one thing that's quite important, that so there's this 40% number, which is again proposer boost. Like if you see more than that, all good, like it's not gonna get reorged. It's like there's no way for the proposer boost of the next proposer to be to do something to it. But the flip side of that is like, what if you don't see 40%? So in the case where you don't release, like if you go down this path, because you've seen, I don't know, 35% or something, then basically what you want as a builder is that the payment is not going to go through. Like if you don't release, then you don't want to pay. And so the idea there is basically to have this payment rule. Yeah, there's no diagram here, so you can, well, yeah, I'm just gonna say it, I guess. Yeah, the payment rule is basically that you need 60% of attestations from the committee for the payment to be processed. And this basically is just going to happen on, so I guess there's two cases. Like one case is everything works fine, the payload actually becomes canonical, then the payment just goes through, everyone is happy, there's no problem, there's no need to wait for attestations. Then the other case where this does not happen, where for example this beacon block B becomes canonical, but the builder is not released, so we're kind of down this path because it did not see enough attestations, then still the payment will be kind of held up. Bodas has some like more specific design of having like a queue of these bids in state, and or like keeping like a cache basically in state of these bids, and basically accumulating attestation weight over time as attestations come in the successive beacon blocks. And then once it gets to 60%, it gets processed. One caveat is like we would actually not want to process it if we would actually want to wait to be sure that there isn't an equivocation for reasons that I'm not going to discuss. That like here, I mean, you can see there's just no equivocation kind of caveat. But anyway, like basically the point is like we're gonna wait to process things for some time. Basically, like an epoch could be like a good rule. Just wait until the end of the next epoch or something like that in the bad case. So when the payment does not happen immediately because everything is fine, we wait until the end of the next epoch, and we only process it if we don't have equivocations and we have at least 60% of attestations. And like basically the reason is like if you did not see 40% of attestations, the block should not get to 60% unless there's like 20% that's late or malicious or something like that, which is basically like a decent safety margin that we've sort of been okay in these designs to give the builder. Like even the other DC design, like the way the four choice worked did not really protect the builder up to a stronger adversary than 20%. So that's where 60% come from, is just 40 plus 20. So that's the builder, and then yeah, you can prove that given these assumptions and these numbers, then kind of everything works fine up until a certain adversary. And yeah, but I guess I should flag like this payment thing is something to kind of think about carefully, like how this would be implemented. And yeah, I see a hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of the complexity of this, or like, I don't know, a piece of complexity in this design, even if it's simpler, was that in-state queue to keep track of attestations to know whether or not there was enough. attestations, I guess. One thing that actually now strikes me as strange is that like we already have this concept of inclusion distance, I guess. And like if there aren't, I guess it's weird, even if we wait to the end of the epoch in order to even if attestations can be counted up for the next two epochs, it's weird that we would choose whether like make payment conditional up to two epochs because the builder made a decision during that slot when those attestations may very well not have been available. I just
Right, but so the issue is like we cannot know whether those so let's say that we decided, okay, let's just make the decision immediately, let's not wait. The issue is, for example, the next proposer might just be, or let's say the proposer of slot n and slot n+1 might be the same proposer, and it might just decide not to include or actually no, this is more of a case. Well, okay, let's say that the proposer of slot n+1 wants to screw the proposer of slot n, then he might just not include attestations for the payment not to be processed, like collude with the builder or just I don't know, out of like malice, just decide not to include attestations in order for the payment not to be processed. And like from the chain's perspective, you can't really know whether or not this happened versus the attestations were late. So that's kind of the issue. It's like if we don't wait some time, it could always be that the attestations did not get on chain just because people didn't decide to include them.
so the extra distance is really just about increasing or like making it less probable that someone would have so many blocks in a row, more or less.
Yeah, basically something like that. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have to be the next epoch, but it also feels to me like there's very little like this extra delay doesn't really do anything too bad, like neither to the proposer. I mean, the person that might end up being delayed is the proposer, but like I don't see what's the difference between getting payment in epoch n versus epoch n+1. And like from the protocol's perspective, keeping track of 30 uh 30 payments that still need to be processed versus like three payments doesn't feel like it's that different. But yeah, POTUS.
Yeah, so I want to make a comment regarding this. My first impression when I read this proposal was that we were shifting complexities, but actually, in fact, we need to delay anyways, and I think we might need to delay even in the happy case because there's this attack scenario in which the builder, since the builder is a validator, that someone is getting slashed, he has a lot of money, and they want to transfer to someone that is not slashed. And if we allow this large transfer of effective balance quickly, then I can just hold two validators, get slashed for a lot of stake on one of them, and transfer all of my money to somewhere else so that it's no longer slashable. So I think anyways on 7732, we need to implement such a cache. Uh, so I feel that even in the happy case, we're going to have to delay the payment and have this cash on state.
I mean, I guess one question is, does the builder need to be a validator? Like, couldn't this balance just be, I mean, maybe that's simplest in some way, but then if then we actually have to deal with this kind of edge cases of slashing and so on, then maybe it's easier to just have builders be some other entity
Well,
with
yeah,
separate
so
stake.
that's an extra level of complexity. It's like if we have we thought about this, like having new validators that are not really validators, they don't have any duties, and they just are builders without any duties, and then this leads to a lot of gaslighting over whether, because now these people have to be heavily staked and they don't get any money out of their stake because they're not earning anything, and then you need to just like have two kinds of builders, ones that are validators and others that are not validators, so that you allow them to earn any interest rates on their stake capital. It just goes on forever. So the simplest option is always to have them as validators. And I spoke to builders, and I mean, the main builders don't mind. And if we are going to implement this cache anyways, then it's no change to do this in the happy case as well. So it's just the same. When two epochs later, you just process all payments and all bids that you have in this cache and it's just a quick processing.
Right. I mean, I guess one question that comes to mind is like, is 2 epoch, if we're thinking about this like slashing, escaping, things like that, is 2 epochs enough? Because I mean, today I guess we have like the 24-hour period or something like that for withdrawing, where like slashing evidence can go on chain. But like, I guess we really wouldn't want to have a 24-hour queue.
Right.
Well, anyway, I mean, yeah,
but I think it's fine, right? So if 2 epochs should be fine, because we can always add this condition that after 2 epoch, if the builder was slashed, I mean, if the slashing happened, it would happen immediately. So if when you're processing this, the builder was slashed, then you just don't process it and you keep it.
Yeah, I guess it's more in case builder gets slash, but you only find out much later. Like, I don't know if, I mean, I guess this is more the really bad case of, I don't know, there's a separate private fork or something like that only gets revealed later with like double finality or like this kind of, I mean, I guess the really worst case thinking why we have in the first place this 24-hour withdrawal delay. But anyway, yeah, I don't think it makes sense right now to get hung up on this too much. But yeah, anyway, I guess there's something to think about. Okay, so so I think this payment processing is definitely generally something that, it should be written down, like a proper spec for it, and like edge cases should be thought about, and implementation complexity and so on. But at least like I try to like motivate why I think it would be good to do it this way. And yeah, so that's basically it for the builder. For the proposer, basically everything up to here is the same as today. Like, you want to extend the head of the chain. So here B is like the thing from the slot before. So if it's not the head of the chain, you don't care. You just extend the head of the chain. If it is the head of the chain, then you basically might still propose or boost reorg it if it's less than 20% attestations. So again, up to here, like nothing different than today. Then what's different is that you now basically require the payload to have at least 50% of this availability committee votes. So it's basically like this 50% will kind of enforce the various things that the availability committee is voting on. And like, it's partially for you, like if you're a builder, or sorry, if you're a proposer that does not download all like columns, like all blobs, then this like listening to these votes and this majority vote is kind of a signal for you. It's basically an availability signal that tells you, okay, like this actually should be available, so it's sort of safe to extend it. So partially it's just for your own protection, essentially, as a proposer that's not subscribed to all column subnets. And another part of it is like, because you basically don't want to like, if this block was late, or if it was not respecting the inclusion list conditions, which would be determined by this like availability votes, then you would basically not want to extend it, because people will not want to vote for it. Like, attesters will also take a look at these availability votes. So that's basically the thing that's added. Like, you require a majority of availability votes in order to actually extend something, but it's only the block from before. Like, if you're at slot n+1, you care about the availability votes from slot n only. Once you go past that slot, like for example, if slot n there was nothing, and the head of the chain is from slot n-1, then you don't care at all about these like payload votes. You only care about the regular fork choice. So you basically would just run things just like you do today. So basically, it's like, I guess one way to think about it is that these availability votes, they're kind of transitory, like they only last for one slot, and then things get solidified by the fork choice. Yeah, Boris?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this. So let me see if I understand why the need to freeze the you said for attesters, they will need to freeze their view on AC votes at 10 seconds or whatever time before the slot ends. There's a freezing time, and it's kind of clear for me for the EL perspective, but it wasn't IL perspective, but it wasn't so clear from the DA perspective. But I assume that it's something similar. If the proposer hasn't seen the data available and will not build on top of the payload because he believes he hasn't received enough votes from the AC committee, then he'll reveal his payload. He'll reveal his block based on empty. And this freezing before is to protect that situation, that the votes from the AC committee, the AC might have not come in time.
Yeah, so it's basically exactly this. Or I mean, I guess the more general, making sure that whatever the proposer sees about the AC votes, like the proposer is just making a majority determination, like was there a majority in the AC votes or not. The attesters are making the same exact determination. This other is again just a majority determination. I haven't talked about it, but that's what it's gonna be. And so we want them to fall on the same side. Like both of them have to see greater than 50% or less than 50%. So let's make like a simple example. Let's say that I'm the proposer here and I see 49% votes. Or like I see basically maybe some votes are missing, but I see like 49% for the votes that I have. And so I decide not to build on this payload. But then let's say that there was no freezing, more votes come in, or the votes were there, but I just haven't seen them because I'm a bit of the edge of the network or something. And so they keep coming and attesters see them. And now they see 51% or like 55 or whatever. They see more than majority. And so that's bad because then attesters are going to say like, why didn't you extend the payload that you were supposed to? And flip case like can be like the opposite, that you extend something but then more votes come in and now it looks like it's not a majority, because this would be like a relative threshold. So if more votes come in, the decision can also go down, like it can start being 55 but then becoming less than that. But yeah, basically either one of these two cases where in some way the proposer and attesters end up being on the wrong side, on different sides of the majority decision. Whereas by doing this freezing, we can basically ensure that whatever the proposer decides, the attesters are also going to decide. And like basically the way that it's going to work is just that the proposer includes the 500 or whatever votes in its block, just like it also includes attestations, but it's specifically going to also include these AC votes. And attesters will basically take into account all of the votes that they've seen by this deadline. Like, I mean, they'll just keep listening to votes, but then put a timestamp or something like that, and they only care about the votes that they've seen before 10. And then they will also consider all of the votes that they've seen in the beacon block. And so that basically makes things work, like in a way where basically all of the votes that a tester see, the proposer will also see. And once you put in the votes from the beacon block, everyone has kind of the same view. So it's like this like vaguely like view merge thing that I've kind of like talked about some other times, but in like a slightly simpler fashion, because it's literally just about these few hundred votes here. Yeah, Terence and or POTUS.
No, it's fine. I'll ask you later.
So I think there's another reason that probably didn't mention is that there's also this equivocation case, right? So as a validator at the AC, say if I send like, because there's no selection condition, right? So if I send an AC1 and AC2 to a tester and to the proposer, then proposer include AC2, but then the tester sees AC1, then this also allows proposer to have the final say, right? So in that case, the attester of the next slot will basically have to respect proposer's AC that is in the block.
Yeah, exactly. So like, yeah, this is basically what's here. Like the kind of, we have very simple rules that like you only ever propagate the first AC vote that you see for someone. Basically the same rule that we have for like every gossip thing. But then when you receive the beacon block, there's going to be more votes that the proposer has put there, and you might see some equivocations. And then if you see an equivocation, you just go with whatever the proposer said. So like you see vote 1 and vote 2 both from the same person. Vote 1 you got it from gossip. Vote 2 you see it in the beacon block that you receive. You just throw away vote 1 and just go with vote 2. Like basically just if there is an equivocation, you just give the benefit of the doubt and just take whatever the proposer saw. So yeah, that's also part of this like kind of merging views mechanism. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, basically this kind of section is just all about arguing that this leads to both the proposer and the testers seeing the same thing, and then making the same decision about majority or not. Okay, so that's that, and I guess maybe let's go to testers quickly. So yeah, basically testers, like this is gonna be this like merge part. So what you do is like you run the for choice kind of normally, but then if you need to make a decision about the payload, so you might be that you don't have to, in which case this everything else here kind of just after the first one just goes out of the window. Like if, for example, the head of the chain is from slot n-1, like it's in the past, there's no payload decision to be made. You don't care about the AC votes, whatever. If you do happen to need to make a decision about the payload because there was a beacon block from the slot before and it is the head of the chain by running the for choice in the normal way, then you now care about the AC votes. So now you're kind of at the final, you need to make this one last decision about empty or not in your for choice. And now this is what the only thing that AC votes do basically. And so now you do merge your view of AC votes, which is this thing that I was saying, like take all the AC votes in the beacon block and kind of always agree with the proposer. Like whenever there is a conflict, like two equivocations, just always go with whatever the proposer says. And if the proposer says something that you didn't see, like a new vote that you didn't have, just go with also add that vote. So you do this process, you end up with some set of AC votes that you consider. Now you do like a majority, you just see like, is a majority of the votes saying yes or no? If they don't say yes, like a majority, then you enforce that P is not extended, which means like if the proposer extended it, you vote against them. Like you will vote for B instead of P. And so this can lead to like, for example, a well anyway, like yeah, basically like this is trying to make it so that the proposer's choice ends up not working out. And yeah, and then basically you as usual in, I guess, PeerDAS or whatever, when it's gonna be, you do a DA check. So you by yourself, even though there is some kind of DA check that's already hidden here, because the voters are also voting on DA. As I said before, this vote on DA is more for the proposer itself. This is more like of a hint for the proposer. You don't just trust the DA determination of the AC votes. You just do your own DA check. So like you just download the columns, and if some columns are missing, you don't care about what the AC says. You just still vote no. So your personal DA check needs to be satisfied, and not just this DA check. And then the final thing is that there is some kind of an inclusion list check that's made also here by the AC voters, but then it kind of gets solidified here. And I'm gonna, if we do have time, I'm gonna talk about that as well. So anyway, yeah, so you do this DA check, this IL check, and now you again make this determination of like, okay, do I enforce that P is not extended, meaning do I vote against P if the proposer has extended P, or do I just do I enforce that it is extended, meaning like if the proposer has extended P, then I'm okay with that and I vote for it. And if the proposer does not extend P, I vote for some. I'll just vote for P basically, and so against what the proposer said. Yes.
So when you say that enforce P not extended, that means the attestation is voting on the block but without the payload.
Yes.
I don't know how to do this without changing the attestation format. So are you including the block hash in the attestation now or something else?
No, it's voting for the parent block. It's not voting on the block that is coming. The attestations are only on blocks. So the new proposer just proposed n+1, and attesters will vote on n.
Oh, I see. That makes
Right,
sense.
but I guess doesn't I mean, even just in the current EIP, isn't there a way to still vote on like be with the payload or without the payload, or like how do you as an tester?
So that's the thing. So I believe that this proposal doesn't really make the implementation of for choice easier. It just makes the theoretical part of it. But most of the complication of for choice implementation remains there, because you still need to deal with empty versus full blocks. That's the largest part of the problem, and you still need to force reorgs of situations like this. Like the block is coming, the testers don't want to have this block and they want to reorg it. And in this particular case, it's easy because you're going to go with your parent, and the parent is going to be empty for anyone. So yeah. So I think the implementation details of this statement, like how to reorg the incoming payload that is bad, is exactly the same in both EIPs.
So here, the for choice store will also track all the AC votes, right? Just similar to how we track the PTC votes today.
Yeah. So
But
the
you only
difference is that
need them
in
for
the
one
current,
slot.
right? So it's only one slot. It's the same as for us.
Right.
We sort of like are stupid in keeping it on every node, but we only need it on one, because anyways we also are doing the same thing that Francesco is suggesting, which is that the proposer can only include votes, PTC votes from the previous block. But the biggest difference here is that we only use PTC votes to determine a boost, and Francesco is using PTC votes in merging the view. So I think the biggest philosophical difference here is the way that we enforce the safety of the builder. In 7732, the safety of the builder is given by this the situation where the builder, for example, sends a message that says, I am withholding because I think this block is weak. And we use this message, we are using the message to not to avoid payment, but to force the beacon chain to reorg the block. And this mechanism here is a different mechanism in saying, I don't need to send a message that I'm withholding. I'm just literally withholding, and I'm not going to be charged for it. And I don't care if the beacon block becomes canonical or not. So that's what makes a for choice much simpler. And that's what's
Right.
the
And
beauty of this
I
approach.
mean, it's also like you don't need to give for choice weight to these actions that the builder takes, which is the part that I'm really like somewhat uncomfortable with, because it's, I mean, both just feels wrong kind of conceptually that like builder gets for choice weight, but also just to me at least it's quite hard to like think about. So yeah, it really, for me, I think what you said is right. It's not so much about making the implementation simpler. It's about making it kind of theoretically simpler, or like not just simpler, because again, as I said, I do feel like giving for choice weight to builders is just really feels like the wrong thing to do. But yeah, so for me it's really more about that, not a simplification in that sense of like thinking about for choice security and things like that. Is like kind of, I mean, I guess partially is that goal, and then also just like trying to like as part of that also like harmonize everything with these other things like fossil and DAS. But I think yeah, that you could probably do as well with the current PTC approach.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yep.
would agree that the current spec is difficult to reason about in terms of fork choice, and that even if it was difficult for implementation, that I don't know, it's still valuable to have a conception you can reason about easier.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the nice thing here in that sense that, I mean, now, you know, it might, I don't know if like anyone's gonna leave this call thinking, oh, this is so simple, but probably because I went through like a bunch of stuff relatively quickly, but really, in some sense, it's just here. Like, this is everything that, I mean, this and the payment mechanism, like, there's not that much else going on. So it's just this like majority vote, and then this mechanism of, you know, if you see 40%, you reveal, and 60% is the payment threshold. So that basically tells you everything about the kind of, yeah, basically what's going on with the behavior of builders and like why they get safety, and other than that, they don't really influence the fork choice much. So yeah, it's in a lot of ways like more similar even to the current fork choice. Yes.
So the other trade-off that is a real trade-off over 7732 is the timelines. I mean, the fact that we're freezing and we have stricter timelines gets me a little bit uneasy, because we were already sort of like at the edge of what we could handle. So it'd be nice to know if we can actually do this freezing at 10 seconds, for example. Perhaps it's fine if we do it at 11, but then that squeezes the IL satisfaction for the builder. I mean, there's always this threshold. The problem that I see is where you put this 10 seconds number. Between 9 and 12, it could be essentially anything, and there's these two different forces that are contending there.
Right. So I guess I should also say one other way to do this that does not have this is that you would say have two different thresholds. One threshold here for the proposer would be 25, and then for a testers would still be 50 here. And so that kind of, then you don't really need this merge thing. I mean, you would I guess for the ILs, but not for this availability committee thing, because basically you would just say if the proposer sees a kind of a similar argument as the 40 and 60. Like if the proposer sees less than 25, then it shouldn't get to 50, and if the proposer sees at least 25, then it's fine. So it would be more like, yeah, 25 would be for being allowed to do something, and 50 would be for enforcing it, as opposed to being like the same 50 for both. I mean, in principle, I feel like it would be nicer to have 50, because it's like that's like, for example, it would mean that, you know, having this 25 and 50 thing would mean that if you have 20 plus something at testers, you could make something look available to the next proposer, which I mean is not the end of the world. But yeah, if we can avoid having these like weaker assumptions, it's nice. But I guess it's not, if we really need to not compress the timelines, then we could just do that. Yeah, I guess what else? Oh yeah, I guess let me just quickly say what the AC is doing. Yeah, it's not doing anything super complicated. It's just saying, do I see a payload? So just like the PTC here, I mean, it says matching headlock, like you specifically would have locked on the first beacon block that you saw. If there is an equivocation, like this is just to deal with the equivocation case. Yeah, and then you vote on, like, you kind of do the DA check, like you'll be doing sampling at this point already, like downloading columns and stuff. So here you already vote on the columns, and again, this is just for the benefit of the next proposer, in case it's like basically it's like if the next proposer is not someone that downloads all columns. And here it's not just if they're a local block builder, like this could be a proposer that uses map boost as well. But this is about, you know, the fork choice and deciding which beacon block to build on, and or sorry, if to extend the payload or not. So even if you're using map boost, you're still the one that's in charge of deciding what to build on. So you still kind of need this hint if you're not someone that's downloading all columns. So this is the only reason why this check exists. And then yeah, this is this like IL kind of thing. Here I don't want to go too in depth about what's going on here, but I guess the only thing to say is like this does not require execution of the payload at this point. There's like a small little thing that you're voting on, that's basically just like a like an inclusion check, like a small inclusion check that does not even require you to look at the transactions. It just requires you to look at some small additional information that's going to come with the payload. And yeah, that's basically that. So you at this point, so just to recap, like we are at this point here in the slot, you just got the payload and you have to vote. It still preserves this property from the PTC that you don't need to quickly execute the payload. So in principle, payload execution could take like up to here or whatever in the worst case, and this would not influence the availability committee votes. And yeah, and that's that. You just vote on the IL satisfaction. and that's it. And then in the next slot, testers will vote on another kind of IL satisfaction where now they actually need to look at the transactions and execute things, but they'll kind of use this. Yeah, basically it's like kind of like a two-step thing where like the AC is doing some kind of check, and the next check builds on top of that and actually looks at the transactions. But I think it doesn't make sense to now go into that. But I think it's fairly simple. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else. I mean, here it's some whatever for choice thing, but I don't think it's different from the current EAP. Yeah, so I guess I don't know. I think that's that for me. I don't know if there's more questions.
Thanks a lot, Francesco. This was great. Terence has questions.
Yeah, thanks, Francesco. This is great. So I guess I question maybe to like you and everyone else is just we have been working on DevNet for the last few months, right? And it sounds like this is a better approach. It sounds like this is something that we might want to move forward. So I guess like what's the plan right now, right? It's like basically I presume there will be spec changes if we go this route. And yeah, just curious for your thoughts.
Can I take that one, but later? I wonder.
Sure.
I mean, sort of like instead of like trying to make decisions now, are there more questions for Francesco and this presentation? Let's have clear what are the trade-offs before. If there are no questions for Francesco, then we can discuss this, how to move forward. But I have a concrete proposal, which is the following. I wouldn't want like a group of 10, 14 people here making decisions of like the direction of the EIP. I personally prefer this approach much more than what we have today. I feel much more at ease with without the boosts. I think it's a good idea. And what personally convinced me is that this biggest trade-off was the implementation detail of enforcing the payments. And I am convinced that we need to enforce them anyways, because having builders not as validators is worse. And I think we need to have this cash anyways. So I think it's a good idea to move forward to this. But let's decide this later. In terms of practical changes, there aren't that many actually. The spec, if we forget about ILs and peer DAS, because that's actually a big change. But from 7732 to this kind of for choice, what changes is the structure of the PTC attestation, because it's no longer has this withholding message. That the payload envelope also changes a little bit because it doesn't have this withholding message anymore. It can just not be there. The PTC attestation will eventually have more data, like the IL availability and the DA availability. But for 7732, without peer DAS and without ILs, nothing changes there. The timelines, so the validator guides, the honest builder guides, all of those behavioral guides do change quite a bit, but those are like always optional. And for choice does change, but it's I think it changes for the better, and it's not that much of a change because anyways you need to do this filtering for empty and full. So my proposal would be that I personally would continue writing the current DevNet for Prism as it is, with sort of like an empty for choice, because what we want to prove with the DevNet or with interrupt is that we can handle the separation of the payload and we can handle the slot time. We want to prove that we can handle 12-second slots with ePBS. That's the biggest unknown. And that's fine with any kind of for choice, so it doesn't matter. And once we have that, I propose that we open a PR to change the spec repo to this proposal by Francesco, only 7732, and then have the people that are working on ILs and PR DAS to rebase on top of that.
If it's just 7732, do we still want the freeze deadline in 10 seconds? Because that's another change you didn't mention, right?
The freeze deadline is it's only important after ILs and PR DAS. Without PR DAS, any validator is just the proposer knows
Right.
about DA already at the proposal time.
Yeah.
So if there's no objection, and this goes specifically to Francesco, I would like to write the CL spec PR, changing from 7732 to this, because I think I have it fresh.
You will also add the beacon state changes as well, right? That is to track the 60% attestations.
Yeah. So that cache, I more or less have an idea on how to implement.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as far as I'm concerned, I just want to say that I've not been super active in the whole PBS development effort in the last few months. I kind of gone back into it with this almost by accident, like while doing something else, and so I don't want to really like, I don't know. I'm kind of okay with whatever people that have actually been working on it feel like is the right way to move forward.
So I think it's a smallish PR because as I said, I think it doesn't really change much. It doesn't really change much from the current implementation. So I don't think it's even going to derail the DevNet efforts that we have. But I think it's probably better if we just like sleep on this, and next call or during the next days we signal this on Discord. And as I said, since I already knew about this project for a while, and I've been like thinking about this, I do feel like I've made a decision, a position at least, that this is better than what we currently have for 7732.
To be clear, do you have in mind also to target this and to have something working for DevCon already in this change, with this change?
No. So actually,
okay.
I won't even write a CL PR until I finish the implementation of the Prism interrupt.
The current, okay.
Yeah. So I'll do the current one, but sort of like with an empty for choice, because it's kind of irrelevant for choice for what we want to prove. You see, the main difference in Francesco's proposal is on the payment mechanism that becomes harder, and on for choice. And the payment mechanism, we already have it implemented in Prism, the current one. And for choice, we don't really need to implement much detail because we only care about, like, in the happy case, we can handle blocks being pressed, payloads being present, we can handle the separation, we can attest to them in 12 seconds. I think this is the purpose of having an interrupt. And I really think that I want to have this before DevCon. So that's still my priority.
Yeah, I agree. So now that we're talking about implementations, I could share what's the current state in Teku. So we have started working on Stefan has started working on fork choice, and we think so. We are kind of confident that we could have something for DevCon essentially.
Oh,
so
nice.
Maybe next week, maybe the other week, maybe more. So Stefan is confident for next week, but he may requires some help. This means that probably having something more confidently working would be for the next week as well. So seems like we could even try Prism Tech, but it won't work.
Asking this, yes. So for choice is kind of irrelevant because it's not really measurable on a DevNet anyways. So what I would want is the separation of the payload and the beacon block. No propagation of bits. Even though we have that implemented, if anyone has it implemented, it's fine. But no need to subscribe to bit propagation on the P2P network. Even self-building, not even contacting a builder, so no builder spec. So what we want is ePBS with self-building. And of course, being able to handle empty blocks, because that's the new thing.
I don't understand how you say no fork choice, though. I don't.
Well, you can use the current fork choice. You can do something minimal that doesn't have block slot, that doesn't enforce builder safety, for example. Builder safety is where we differ in Francesco's approach and our current approach. So we could have a DevNet working that proves that we can handle 12-second slots without assuring the builder that he's not going to that the block is going to be reorged if he withholds. And that I think is fine for me.
Okay.
If we have a DevNet that splits on fork choice, but that everything is working, it's just that we are split because we consider some blocks heavier than others, that's absolutely fine. That's much better than, I mean, honestly, what I would expect is that if we have any DevNet by DevCon, we're going to be broken in like a Genesis. So if we are broken only on fork choice, I'm very happy.
So there's still a PTC committee. I don't know. I guess
Yeah, the PTC has to be there. The PTC vote is there. Like handling all of the networking part of that ePBS requires besides the bids should be there. The PTC attestations have to be there.
I kind of, sorry, Dustin. Over recent times, like I got busy with some Electra DevNet 4 stuff, so I hasn't had much time to continue to dive into fork choice. So I don't know. It's just I don't know if I'll be able to parse out exactly what needs to be implemented. That's all. In time for DevCon.
About the PTC, I guess one thing is the votes for the PTC can just be completely ignored. Like people vote, but then you don't actually use them in the fourth choice. So in that sense,
Correct.
that doesn't
Correct.
have to do anything. So you just, I guess, if you see a payload, you just take it, and if you don't, you don't, without caring about the votes.
Yeah, so in the current 7732, the PTC vote is only used to construct the boost. So you can just not implement the boost, and that's fine. You can just keep fork choice as it is. The only problem is that you still need to implement fork choice with empty and full blocks. You need to keep track of these nodes that are going to come like based on if a payload is missing, you need to be able to handle that situation in your chain, that you may have some blocks that came without a payload and that are still canonical. So this will have to have a fork choice implementation in whatever client you're writing, and that's the part that you cannot avoid. All right, guys, we're over time. It's true. It was a great meeting. Thanks a lot, Francesco. I think we can really move forward with this, and I'm very bullish on this. I'm very happy that it also seems to be making IELTS easier. So dusting is separation of payload and beacon block. No fork choice because irrelevant. Self-building, no builder, correct. No need to subscribe to propagation of the bid. I assume, and yes. ePBS with self, yes, correct. That was always the idea for the DevNet. Except that we wanted to have full fork choice, but I guess now it's kind of irrelevant.
Okay, good to understand. I just wanted to kind of get it fairly focused in the limited time remaining. So
Yeah,
right.
given what Teco said, I'm gonna have to spend some long nights in the next few days. But yeah.
Right.
Great. Thank you,
All right,
guys.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.